Yeah, welcome everybody. So thank you very much for joining our sessions on undergraduate and graduate, that is bachelor's and master's education. We had run the series with Dr. Donald Martin, and really we got excellent response. And today in the first round of different topics which we covered, we are going to wrap up that part of it. So it will, Dr. Donald Martin will summarize all what we have spoken. So we may not go into the too much detail about it, but a complete overview. And we do expect that you should ask any questions on any of the webinars, prior webinars, which we have done. And today also I welcome the Orchid School, which is now, we had recently a discussion, and they will be joining today's webinar. So the students and parents of the Orchid School, and definitely they had not attended the initial webinars, but they will be attending. So let me brief you about Dr. Donald Martin. He was a former admissions dean at Columbia University, which you may be knowing is Ivy League University, and University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Now, US News has ranked the Booth School of Business as #1 management school in the United States. And he was an opportunity to get into Northwestern, Wheaton College, where he was evaluating the student profiles. He was admitting the things. More than 125,000 applications in 1980 to 2008. During that period, he has evaluated, he's admitted the students. And since 2008, he's working with the different students and parents across all continents and countries. He's also written a great book, on the graduate study, roadmap to graduate study. If anybody wants, we will ship it free of cost, that book part of it. He's also writing the columns on US News World Report, and has been visiting various universities. So let me welcome Dr. Donald Martin once again. And then maybe next month we will start another series on different, and we'll go into more details into that, and we will definitely work on. So welcome, Dr. Donald Martin, and request you to kindly take over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dioris. Hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be back with many of you again. And for those that are joining us for the very first time, welcome to you as well. It is great to be here. I have said in prior webinars, Dr. Dioris has not asked me to say this. I say it on my own. What a pleasure it is to be associated with the Astute Academy. In my 42 years of working in higher education, I can tell you this is the best academy in all of India preparing students for undergraduate and graduate study, but it's also one of the best in the world. And for those of you who are having the privilege of working with Dr. Dioris and his team, that's exactly what it is. You have a privilege. And I have felt the same. We've been working, collaborating together, probably, I believe, a little over 10 years now. I can't believe how fast that time has gone. And it's just been a privilege to know and work with Dr. Dioris and the Astute team. And as he mentioned, today's webinar is going to be really a review of all of the webinars we've presented so far, both for undergrads and grads, thinking about wanting to study at the undergraduate or graduate level in the United States. While certainly there are some differences between the application process for undergrad and graduate school in the US, there are also far more similarities. There are some things that are very much the same. And today, in this time that we have together, I'm going to be reviewing all of those somewhat similar areas of the application process that hopefully will be of help to those of you considering attending college or perhaps a master's degree program, or perhaps even someday a doctoral degree program here in this country. Now, I was looking back on my calendar. We began this series of webinars back in May. So we've been presenting over time for 4 months. We've had the privilege of presenting various pieces of information. We talked early on about earning a college or grad degree in the US, being a competitive applicant came after that. Then we spent some time talking about a checklist for applicants. We spent 2 webinars talking about, of course, the important, the all-important application process. And then our last webinar earlier this month was focused on financial aid tips and information to help those who are, of course, thinking about this aspect of paying for your education, which I'm sure everyone is. So I'm going to cover all of this today by way of review, and then I'm going to try to finish my comments within the next half hour or so that we have time for you to ask me any questions about anything that we've covered. And maybe there's something you don't see here that we have talked about that you would still like to ask. So there's no bad questions. As Dr. Dioris knows, as those know who have joined us for prior webinars, I love questions. That is something I am very, very much about. I want you to leave this session today. Hopefully, if you felt this way in prior sessions, those of you who've been joining us before, I hope you leave this session feeling that you got something that will help you, truly help you, as you continue to move forward. And if you are a parent who is joining us today, I applaud you and commend you for the dedication that you are showing to your children by wanting to be helping them to continue to succeed in their future career. So thank you for being here. And if you're a school administrator or an advisor, whoever you are, and of course, if you're a prospective student, I'm delighted to have this chance to chat with you. And for those who've joined us before, I'm sure you know what the first topic is going to be. It's right here at the top of the list. I've covered this in every single webinar for Astute, and I cover this in every webinar or presentation I give around the world, because it is truly, to me, critically important. And it is the biggest mistake prospective students make. This happens every year. It happens in the United States. It happens in Canada, in Latin America, in Europe, in Australia, in Asia, and certainly in India. It happens everywhere. This is a pervasive concern that I have, and that's why I bring it up in every webinar I do. So, as I've done before, those of you who've heard me speak earlier, you know what the answer to this question is. But for those of you who are joining us for the first time, what do you think is the biggest mistake prospective college and graduate students make? What do you think it is? I'm sure, and there's more than one, of course, but what do you think the biggest mistake is? I'll give you just a few seconds to just process that question. Maybe discuss it with your neighbor if someone is sitting with you watching this webinar. What do you think it is? Well, my answer to this question is the biggest mistake prospective college and graduate students make every year is not doing adequate research before they apply. Many prospective students approach and sometimes parents similarly, or school advisors. There's a sense that sometimes the only means of determining where someone is going to apply is a ranking or word of mouth from someone else. Someone else thinks you should consider this institution. Now, please don't hear me saying that I believe that rankings or word of mouth are totally bad. I don't believe that. I think they're useful. I think they have a part in the process of determining where you would like to apply and ultimately where you would like to enroll for your undergraduate or graduate education. But my point is, there should be many other ways of doing your research that help you decide which institutions you will apply to. In my book, in the first chapter, and by the way, even though that initial book was directed at a graduate school audience, in many, many, many pages of this, it's about 106 pages long, by the way. It's not an exhaustively long book. I deliberately didn't write it to be a long book, but there are highlights throughout the book. And in chapter 1, in the chapter on the research part of things, I cover at least 26 different ways you should be comparing options before you decide where you're going to apply. 26, not just 2, not just a ranking, not just what someone else thinks. There are so many other things you should be looking at as you compare your options. So please, 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 how do you avoid this problem from happening? Remember, your perception about the options you're considering happens after you do your research. It's not where you start out. You don't start out with your rank order, in my opinion. That's a mistake. You start out with an open mind. You start out with every institution in a way they're all equal at the start. And then as you do your research, as you learn more about these institutions, then you say to yourself, okay, I'll look at 7 schools based on all of the research that I've done. Maybe you started off with 25 options. I hope you did, or I hope you do. You should not start out with just 4 or 2 or 5. You start out with a much larger group, and then after you do your research, you narrow that down to the in particular schools to which you will apply. So remember, please do your research, and your perception about your programs happens after you do all your research. It's not where you start out. All right, now, one of the first webinars we covered, in fact, it was the first webinar, talked about pursuing education in the United States. Excuse me. And again, based on what I just shared with you, this is about finding, I probably should have said, this is about finding the best match for whom? For you, the prospective student. With all due respect to advisors, parents, friends, relatives, whatever, they are not going to school. You are. This is your educational path, whether it's college or graduate school. You're the one that is going to do this, not them. So you need to keep in mind that while you want to listen to advice and some input from those you love and who love you and support you, that's great. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, this is your decision about where you're going to attend, not theirs, because it's your life, it's your career, it's your educational path. As I mentioned, start out with maybe 10, 15. I had one student that I worked with recently. Do you know how many options they had on their initial list? 40. 40 options. I thought that was wonderful. They narrowed it down to 10 programs. They eliminated 30, and they ended up with the 10 that they wanted to apply. So start out, my point is, start out with a large group of options, and then you narrow it down. One of the things that can be very helpful is to create a spreadsheet. And my suggestion is, on the column that you're going to list your options, put them in alphabetical order. Don't put them in some other order yet when you're first starting out. just put them in alphabetical order. And then across that right-hand column or left, wherever you decide to put it, what it is you would like to know about these schools. There should be at least 7 to 10 areas you would want to compare, including what do current students or recent graduates have to say about this school. Find out as much as possible as you possibly can about these schools. What is their class size? How do they teach their material? What are their students doing after they finish the program? On and on and on. There's so many things. You can check it out in my book on the first chapter, all of the areas to compare. Please don't rely solely on word of mouth or a ranking. Just please don't. I'm not saying you can't use that at all. I'm just saying be very careful that you don't make that your sole 2 reasons for why you're choosing the schools that you are. Obviously, there's some other things here: preparing for standardized tests, creating a strong list of recommenders, keep track of your deadlines. We'll go through some of this as we continue. But that was kind of what we were trying to get across in that first set of webinars around pursuing education in the US. Here's some other, now these are in my book. At the end of chapter 2, if you order the book, and Astute has very kindly and graciously offered to send a free copy to you, I hope you'll take advantage of it, because this book, I'm not saying this just because I wrote it, but on the other hand, I've been doing this work. By the time I wrote that book, I was in higher education for almost 28 years, almost 30 years when I wrote the book. There's a lot of information there from my own background. And this list of 7 ways to be positively noticed as an applicant, and then the opposite. You don't want to be noticed this way. I call these the 7 deadly sins for applicants. They're listed at the end of chapter 2 in the book. I will not spend a lot of time on all of these right now, because we'll cover a lot of this again in these next minutes as we go through our other webinars. I already see some questions that are coming into the Q&A box here on this platform. That's excellent. I hope you'll keep them coming as I go through. I will do my best. We'll try to answer any and all questions that we can today at the conclusion of my remarks. Okay, now our next webinar series was about being a competitive applicant. What can you do to help yourself be as competitive as possible? As you'll see, some of this information is covered in other webinars because it's very important. And the first one, we won't even go any further on that, but do your research, okay? Make sure that you know your timelines as how you're going to pace yourself to prepare and submit your applications. Of course, make sure that you are keeping in mind the deadlines. If you pace yourself and you plan ahead and you are organized in this process, you're going to be able to feel a bit more relaxed and ready when those application deadlines come. Some students wait until the last week or two, and then they try to rush and cram everything. That's a surefire formula for making mistakes. And you can't afford to make mistakes as an applicant, especially avoidable mistakes, excuse me. You do not want to make a mistake that you could avoid making. And one of the ways to avoid that is to know your timelines, your deadlines, pace yourself, plan ahead. I have a lot about that in my second chapter of the book. Get your recommenders confirmed. We're going to talk more about recommenders in a few moments. Get your application accounts open as early as you can. Once they open up, go ahead in, set them up, get some of that information going. Make sure you spend enough time to make sure you have the best resume you can, and that or CV and your essays. We're going to, a good portion of today, I am going to repeat some of my tips for essays, because as we know, many programs not so much at the undergraduate level, but certainly at the graduate level, are no longer requiring test scores. They are not asking for a GRE, for instance. In fact, some of them won't accept test scores anymore. So essays become even more important in light of that. One tip truly that I hope you'll take away, it's just as important to me as the idea of doing good research, and that is to be yourself. I think admissions folks in the US do a disservice to applicants by convincing them or trying to convince them that somehow they need to be Superman or Wonder Woman. They have to be these absolute perfect applicants. I want to tell you a little secret. In the 42 years I have worked in this industry, in working with undergraduate and graduate students, I have never seen a perfect application. There isn't one. And please let me say that again. There is no perfect application. And you should not be pushing to have a perfect application, because if you do that, you may sacrifice letting them truly see who you are and get to know you. We're going to talk about what to do if you have a potential weakness in your application, a few points down here. But this was what we tried to cover a little bit of in the series on being a competitive applicant. Now, let's talk about some common mistakes that prospective undergraduate and graduate students make. Very quickly, focusing, as we said, on only prestigious schools, only the top 2 or 5. That is truly a mistake, a major mistake. So I wish I had more time to go into this. If after this webinar you'd like to reach out to me or to Astute to ask any questions on this particular issue, please feel free. I could talk about that for hours. Not paying equal attention in your applications to academics, essays, and extra, only focusing on one thing and not realizing that your application is a composite. It is a list of credentials in all kinds of different ways to help the admissions committee get to know you, and you need to pay equal attention to those. Sometimes not telling your story well so that all the components come together, being consistent in the story that you are telling the admissions committee about yourself. And again, not being yourself, we're not psychologists in the admissions office, but over time, you start to get an idea when someone is either being fake or they're being themselves. They're just being real. You want to focus on being yourself. There's only one of you. Remember that. There's only one of you, and you're very special in that way. That's what you need to focus on as you prepare the information you want the admissions committee to receive in responding to their questions and the requirements they have for you with your application. All right, the importance of planning ahead. In our next series of webinars, we talked about how to pace yourself, how to plan ahead so that you are, my last point here, that you're far less likely to be rushing and therefore making needless mistakes. That's what you want to. So how do you do that? How do you stay on top of everything? Well, by being organized and starting early. Now, I'm going to go through very quickly here. This webinar focused on a suggested 12-month checklist of things you should be doing leading up to your applications. Now, some folks condense this to a 9-month checklist, maybe even 6 months. But the point is, it should not be the 1-month checklist before you apply, okay? It should be far enough out. But let's start with, there are 3 items for each of these that we covered. 10 to 12 months out, of course, here's some things that we've already talked about. Get that spreadsheet going, do your research. Don't rank order your options yet. This is just the beginning. You're just starting to do some research. And by the way, this is 10 to 12 months before you're going to submit your application. I'm not talking 12 months before you're going to start in the fall. So in other words, right now, ideally, if you're thinking about applying next year, fall of 2023 to start your college or graduate school program in the fall of 2024, you're in a perfect spot. You're a year ahead of submitting your applications. This is where you want to start. 9 to 7 months out. Now you get a little bit more into perhaps planning some campus or virtual admissions events. To me, one of the most important ways you can do your research is to reach out to current students and recent graduates. Anyone who does not do that before they decide where they're applying, I think is missing some tremendous information. That is and if you're starting far enough ahead of time, you can do that. So this is what you should be focused. You're starting to get a little bit more directed in what you're doing. 6 to 4 months out. Now you might want to sit in on some admissions webinars like we're doing. There may be other. You definitely want to confirm your recommenders and make sure that you're getting your transcripts ready so that when those application accounts open up, you can just go right in there and provide the information on your, upload your transcripts, let them know who you've asked and who's going to recommend you. And finally, 3 to 1 months out, of course, you open up your accounts, fill in all of your name, your address, upload all your documents, and try to get that out of the way as soon as you can so that you can spend quality time on your applications. That's what you really want to be focusing on. Spend quality time on those essays and making sure you're submitting the very best essays that you possibly can. Okay, then we spent 2 entire webinars on the application process. Obviously, there's so much to cover here. I will not have time to do all of it today by any means. But that said, there are 3 major parts of your application over which you have the most control as an undergraduate or graduate school applicant. They are your resume, your recommendation letters, and your personal statements. You have control over preparing your resume and your essays, and you get to decide who it is that is going to recommend you. That is very, very, very important. So just remember, there are other things you'll be submitting, but those are the 3. So let's talk about them very, very quickly. I'm going to have to go through this. Our time is running by. But again, there are copies of these webinars available with Astute. And if you want to go back and review the actual webinars we did on each of these topics, great. Or you can go back and review this one. Remember that your resume needs to be inclusive, not just of academic experience, but also, especially if you're applying for college or master's programs. At the doctoral level, it might be a little different. That's a bit of a different document. But for college or master's degree applicants, you need to remember, again, you're focusing on everything. Your academic history, extracurricular, volunteer, whatever. It's an entire snapshot of you, if you will. A quick, short look at who you are. Typical order here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you should put your academic information first. Some folks feel they should do that at the end. That's typically more if you're creating a resume for job interview purposes. For educational programs, for applications for graduate or undergraduate, your academic information comes first. And at the end, it's helpful to have a skills and interest section that talk about just some of your skills. Do you speak more than one language? What are your technology skills at this point? And a brief section on what do you like to do outside of the classroom or outside of the office? What are some of your hobbies, some of your interests? One other thing here, just a couple ideas. The middle one here, I want to just mention quickly. Be honest about your accomplishments, but be humble about them. This is not the place for you to brag about yourself. There's a difference between stating the truth about a promotion or a recognition. Maybe you got on the dean's list. Maybe you received a prestigious scholarship award or whatever. That's good, but you want to be very careful about how you say that. The people who are going to sing your praises in your application are your recommenders, not you. This is something to be very careful about. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. You want to focus on confidence. And lastly here, remember, when you're working on your resume, that's very good preparation for what you'll be doing with your essays and personal statements down the road. It's a very worthwhile undertaking to get your resume the best that you can make it. All right, letters of recommendation. Oh my. And as Dr. Dioris mentioned, I believe we will be doing a special webinar about this, a webinar series actually, for both those who are going to be requesting letters of recommendation and then for those who would actually be completing them. This is critical. This is recommendation letters are far more important than you may think. Let me just say, in the 28 years, Dr. Dioris mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, I evaluated over 125,000 applications during the 28 years that I served in full-time admissions and enrollment work at Columbia, University of Chicago, Northwestern, and Wheaton. During that time, I would say that 90 to 95% of the letters of recommendation that I read were meaningless. They did not help me at all. They were useless. So if you have a good recommendation letter, if you handle this part of things well, and you work with your recommenders and they take the time to prepare the kind of letter that they should and that they're being asked to prepare, that's going to help you tremendously. And I'll just say this, what is a good recommender? A good recommender is someone who knows you in two ways: long enough and well enough. Long enough and well enough to truly provide an authentic, honest, positive letter of recommendation. So I'll stop there for right now. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on essays. Very quickly, we had 13 tips for preparing essays when we got to this part of the webinar on the application process. Number one, allow the time that you need. This is not something you start writing a week before your deadline. If you do that, you are bound to be rushing and you're not going to do, as good of a job. Number two, I wish I didn't have to say this, but please follow directions. Answer the questions that you're asked. It seems like I would not have to say this, but I do. Sometimes applicants, I don't know what they think, but they prepare something that is completely different than what they were asked to prepare. If there's several questions in a prompt, answer all of them and in the order that they were asked. And please, if they give you a word or page limit, stick with that. Give them what they asked for. Number three, it might help you to create an outline before you start writing your essays. I often suggest someone just sit down with a piece of paper, or you could have a Word document on your computer and just write down everything that comes to mind in terms of answering whatever it is, whatever the question is or questions that you've been asked to answer. Just write them all down. No right or wrong yet. Then after that, you go back and look at everything you wrote down that you might want to talk about. Then you could reorganize it. And you might say, oh, I don't think I'm going to talk about that at all. You cross that out and you reorganize. Then you start writing. So use bullet points, create an outline, and don't, at first, when you first do this, don't rule out anything. Just put what comes to your mind, then reorganize it a little bit. Number four, if you have a particular story to tell that you believe is appropriate and would be compelling for the committee, it can be very nice to start out with that, or a quote. Something like this can be helpful. It's not mandatory, but it can definitely be useful. Number five, remember, this is your voice. This is very important, folks. This is not, again, your parents are not writing this. It's not their application. It's not your guidance counselor's application. It's your application, and therefore your essays need to be in your voice. one way to help you with this is to pretend that you're sitting in front of the admissions committee and they're actually talking with you. They're asking you questions. Number 6, after you do your first draft, read it out loud and so forth. Number 7, always, always, always check. Make sure when you send in your essays, you're sending in the final versions, not the first one. If you have lots of mistakes, you might have 1 or 2, that's okay. But if it's riddled with mistakes, you will be denied. Number 8, get somebody else to read and give you some feedback. But remember, this is just advice. You are just asking for their thoughts. You don't give them the essay and have them rewrite it for you. That's doesn't make any sense, not to mention that's unethical in terms of US application standards. Number 9, please send the correct essay to the correct destination. Do not send one essay to the University of Illinois that you meant to send to the University of Iowa. If that happens, that could end up causing you to be denied. Number 10, as I said, be yourself. So though I thought there were 13, I guess it was 10 essay tips. Now, grades and test scores. Obviously, this is a critical component of your application, and you may need to be prepared to explain something if your grades are not as high, if your test scores were not as good. But this is obviously a critical part. But so is extracurricular and volunteer activities. They're also critically important. And remember, it's not about the number of activities you've had, but the quality of them. I have applicants who have had 1 extracurricular activity, but they've been doing it for 4 years. And they've been so active. That's wonderful. You don't have to have 10, but you do need to show that you have a life outside the classroom. So here again, the interview. So if you are invited to interview or get the chance, obviously this is very important. I don't have time to obviously go through all of these, but one thing I will say, make sure you dress appropriately, find out how you're supposed to be dressed, and prepare. Do some practicing, have a mock interview, go through what are some of the questions you could be asked so you're better prepared to answer them. Addressing potential weaknesses. There could be things that have happened, especially in recent years in light of COVID-19. There may be things that you need to explain to the admissions committee about whatever. And if so, be prepared to do that we're not making excuses here, but we are providing an explanation. Once again, there's a difference. I said earlier, there's a difference between confidence and arrogance when you're presenting yourself. There's also a difference between an explanation, which is good, and an excuse. You don't want to make excuses, but you do want to provide explanations. What happens if you're waitlisted or denied? One particularly important point I'd like to cover here. Do not take it personally. This is not an assessment of your ability to do undergraduate or graduate work at all. The Dean of Admissions is operating with guidelines, with requirements. They can only bring in so many students. And the more competitive the program, the more applicants. So it's a very difficult choice many times to decide who's going to get in. If it doesn't work the first time, there's some suggestions here of what you can do if you're waitlisted or denied. But above all, this is not a personal attack of you. It might be disappointing, I'll grant you, but it's not an indication that they think that you're not a good student, not at all. Now, our final webinar earlier this month talked about financial aid tips. And we covered, maybe that's where it was 13 tips. That's what it was. And we talked about so much, but here's a couple of highlights of that work or that webinar. And one of the major points here is that you should not assume that the award you receive for your first year of college or graduate school is all you're going to get. There could be more. There is a possibility to get more financial aid in subsequent years. So, and also just remember that while it may be a little confusing, if you're filling out forms for more than 1 year. Unfortunately, in the United States, financial aid policies, regulations, guidelines change all the time. And 1 year they're doing one thing, and the next year they're doing something else. It can be very, very confusing. But keep in mind that financial aid is available for international students, maybe not as much as would be available in the US, especially when it comes to loans, but there are opportunities. Again, the earlier you plan ahead, the more you'll be ready to think about how you're going to meet your financial obligations when the time comes. Okay, I think I actually did this in a half hour. I can't believe it. I hope we're going to get some more questions. I think we have 5 so far. That's wonderful. Just wanted to mention that, as I said, I and my colleague, Ms. Deborah Zakarian, are both working with Astute right now. I've been with Tushar and his team for over 10 years. We've had an incredibly wonderful working relationship. We're able to help with undergraduate applicants and with graduate applicants, starting as early as the 9th standard if you're an undergrad applicant, or your freshman year if you're going to be applying for graduate school. We can assist with just about every part of the process that you would like us to. We're happy to step in and help wherever Dr. Dioris would ask us to. For any of you, we would welcome that chance. And Ms. Deborah was not able to be here today. She is not feeling well. And so I did want to I mentioned her. She's participated in other webinars. Ms. Deborah is an excellent addition to our team, and she's going to be working with me this year, has already been doing so. And perhaps one of the most important things you should know is that 100% of her coaching clients have been accepted to their top choice school. She's an outstanding addition to our team with Grad School Roadmap. Okay, let me just say that I wish you, Ms. Deborah and I, we wish you every success at whether it's undergraduate or graduate in your future plans, your career goals, your educational goals. And thank you so much for spending up to this point with me. I'm now going to turn things over to Dr. Dioris. We have some questions. I hope we'll get more. I will be happy to answer any and all of them. Dr. Dioris, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Excellent session with which covered, I know this was every topic was very big topic, and we had separate webinars on each of the topic, and to summarize all into just 30 minutes or 40 minutes is a big challenge. And I think this was done so that we get an overview of the situation. And now let's come to the question part of it. So there is the first question which is there. What are the honors college or honors batches, and what is the difference between the regular and the honors college? And how do we upgrade from regular to honors?
Great question. The primary difference between the honors college and the regular college curriculum is that it's considered a bit more difficult. They're tending to be more upper level courses that are planned for this particular college. And in some cases, there may be some actual required courses in the first year, especially, maybe even in the second, that might be of what we might call general education requirements in English, history, literature, foreign language, sciences, math. There might be a particular curriculum that is specified for honors college graduates, students. To get into the honors college, typically you can indicate that you would like to apply to be considered if they have that in their application. In some cases, but I think it's less likely, there may be an entire separate application. Usually that's not the case. You fill out the same application, but if you've indicated that you're interested in the honors college and they decide that they are interested, then you would be admitted also not just to the institution, but to the honors college as well. I believe it is possible, but not very many do have a chance to transfer into the honors college once they have started their undergraduate program. That is less likely to happen under certain instances. My suggestion would be, if it doesn't work out for you to join when you first begin, then once you're there, once you get to campus, I would suggest you go and speak with someone in the honors college, a member, someone, an advisor, a director, a program coordinator, and ask them what the process might entail for you to perhaps be permitted to transfer into the honors college at a future point. Good question.
Yeah. And next question is about the scholarship part of it. Can we get a need-based scholarship in the second year or later? Particularly, this has already many parents, due to pandemic and all, I have suffered. So whether the universities can provide a need-based scholarships?
Yes, need-based scholarships are less likely than merit-based scholarships, usually. But here's something, there may be instances where there could be a particular donor who makes a scholarship program available at a particular institution, and the criteria to receive that scholarship is solely financial need. It has nothing to do with merit. So that's possible. But here's a suggestion also for those students and whoever's listening here. One of the greatest ways to increase your chances of scholarship help as you are going through your program is to do extremely well in your courses. Let's say you end up with a 4.0, a straight A average at the end of your first term, and it looks like you're going to get that again in the second term. That will put you in possible consideration for a merit-based scholarship in your next year, in your second year. So that's one of the best ways to help yourself be considered for scholarships subsequently after you actually start your program. As always, Tushar, these are excellent questions. It looks like more coming in. This is great.
Yeah. So another question is, I am a science student. So can I shift to the accountancy?
Well, let's see. If you are a science student as an undergraduate and you are wishing to switch to study accounting at the graduate level, at the master's level, that's possible. However, what I would strongly recommend is that you take a look on the websites of the programs you're looking at for accountancy, and if it's not there, hopefully it will be, but either find out on their website or send them an email to the admissions email address asking, what are there any prerequisites if you do not have an accounting major as an undergraduate? Are there any prerequisites or special course requirements that you do have to have in order to make the switch? But yes, there are you can move from one undergraduate program to another, a different field, provided you are meeting the certain requirements that they have in their admissions process.
There is another question about the extra credits. So can we take earlier AP credits or the summer credits in some community colleges while I'm doing the undergraduate education?
Let me make sure I heard this right, Dr. Diores. This person wants to know if while they're in their undergraduate program, they would be permitted to take some AP or other classes in the summer. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, so summer credits is one part during the AP credits before they enter the undergraduate, the AP credit. And when they enter into undergraduate, at that time to fill up additional credits, can they take the summer programs?
Oh, yeah. you are at, if you would like to take some summer programming at your institution, or perhaps at another institution and transfer in, you can certainly take summer courses in the institution you're attending if they're offered and they're part of your major or your program of study. If you want to take a course at another university, then you would need to check with your academic advisor, your faculty advisor, or perhaps with the registrar's office to find out whether or not that would be permitted for transfer purposes. AP credit obviously is only taken before you enroll in your undergraduate work, not after you start.
Can we get two scholarship, need-based and the merit-based together?
Oh, yes, yes, you can. They're when I was that's a great question. When I was working in particular at the University of Chicago's Booth School of Business, I was in charge of both. For a time, I was in charge of admissions and financial aid, and then I became in charge of all of both the prospective student and the current student programs. And when we made financial aid decisions, we absolutely, for some individuals, awarded them some need-based help and some merit-based help. That is definitely a possibility.
Do you feel the 90% of the applications are rejected because of the wrong essays, or essays in that important part of the application process?
That's a great question. I would say that poorly written essays, or essays that don't answer the questions, or where an applicant comes across sounding very arrogant about himself or herself, definitely doesn't help. But admissions committees, truly, most of the admissions committees here in the United States are looking at your application in its entirety. They are not just segmenting out essays or recommendation letters or academics or extracurriculars or a resume or what. They're going to look at everything. And as I said earlier, there's no perfect applicant. So an applicant could get admitted who had an essay that may not have been right up there, it was a good essay, but it may not have been one of the most excellent that was read, but everything else in the application was strong. Or someone has excellent essays, but they had very weak test scores, but they still get admitted. It's what you want to focus on is making sure that what you submit with your application on every level is the best that you can submit. But I will say essays are critical because that's your chance to speak to the admissions committee. That is your chance to let them hear you. So clearly they play a role. And in some instances, yes, if the essays are very poor and very badly composed or written or whatever, no matter what else is in the application, in some instances, that would cause an applicant to be denied.
Okay, great. Another question, will research publications get you into the Ivy League university?
Well, yes and no. Having research or having, if you're applying, I'm assuming now you're talking about a master's degree program or graduate degree program, and as part of your credentials, you're able to demonstrate that you've had some research experience, perhaps published a paper or whatever, you've had some publications or conference presentations or posters. That's great. And there are those who've been admitted to Ivy League universities who had those things, but there have also been folks who had them who were denied to Ivy League institutions. And there have been some individuals who didn't have a publication who got into an Ivy League institution. Here again, I just want to try to emphasize, it is the entirety of your application that is going to be evaluated. And it's not just one component that might kind of push you over the top. It's going to be everything you submit, how well you have presented all of that information. And then the admissions committee will say, okay, do we think we have a student here that we would like to have join us. So research, background, publications is excellent. And if you've got that as part of your credentials, congratulations. And hopefully you'll showcase that in a very good way on your resume and in your application.
Yeah, great. If I make any mistake in the application, is there any way to correct the same after submission?
Oh, am I ever? Oh, that's Dr. Dioris. I think that's the first time we've been asked that question, and I'm so glad we were. You absolutely can correct a mistake, and you should not feel embarrassed about it. In fact, it's impressive to an admissions committee that you caught it and that you're letting them know that you're aware of what happened. And what you do, don't get all upset. You do not have to keep apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. No, you just send a message to the email address of the admissions office and say something like, after submitting my application, I noticed that I made a mistake. And here's what it is. Is there any way to correct this? What can I do? And they'll get back and let you know. And they'll be very appreciative that you did that. So absolutely. Do not. Now, you don't want to be responding to them 4 or 5 times after you apply and keep discovering more mistakes. But if one time, if you discover 1 or 2 things, absolutely, you should reach out and feel free to do that. That is met with a very positive response.
Okay. What is the process to take admission in Columbia University?
Well, the process for admission to Columbia at either the undergraduate or the graduate level would be similar to any other university. There is an application process that would be described on the website for whichever program you're thinking about, and you would go ahead and complete that application just as you would any of the others that you're applying to. Of course, keeping in mind that Columbia is one of the most competitive institutions in this country. It does have many folks apply there, so the chances of getting in are a little bit less just because of the number of applications. But the process of applying is pretty much the same at the undergraduate level and at the graduate level. There's a very similar process that you will go through, whether it's Columbia or another institution that may not be as highly ranked as Columbia.
How much should we put the weightage to the acceptance rate in any university?
Well, that's a great question. Of course, you want to be aware of how many applicants typically are admitted every year into an institution. That allows you to be a little more informed. And let's just say that one of the schools you're applying to only admits 5% of their applicants. Well, what that tells you then is your chances of getting in are not very high. Not because you're not a good applicant. It has nothing to do. It's just, let's say they have 50 openings and they're going to have 500 applications or something. So there's going to be only a very small number who get in. That should, if you really want to go ahead and apply there, you should feel like, if you think you have a chance, then you should apply. But also, let me say, for institutions where the acceptance percentage is lower and they have information about what their applicant or their incoming class tends to look like in terms of average GPA, average test scores, whatever it is that they're, and you don't meet that criteria, then you have a decision to make. Either you apply, either you say, I think I'm not going to apply because I don't think I meet those criteria, or I'm still going to apply, but I have a very strong idea that I probably won't get in, but I still want to try.
Yeah. After the undergraduate, is it recommended to do the master's, MS or the PhD, or with a bachelor's I can continue into my career?
That's a great question. It's really up to you. and how some students go right from their bachelor's to their master's to their PhD. Others take some time in between. Now, let's talk about business for just as an example. If you want to pursue an MBA, a master's in business administration, you're going to have to work several years in the professional world before you do that. You can't just go right from your bachelor's into an MBA program. But let's say it's biology, psychology, computer science, many fields. In those fields, yes, you can go right into a master's or a PhD. If that's up to you, honestly. Some applicants would like to get some real world experience in. That's what I did. I took 2 years in between my undergraduate degree and starting my master's program, and I took 5 years between my master's and my PhD. Others do it differently. This is really up to you. Both options, going right through or spacing it out a little, either one is perfectly acceptable.
How the essays are evaluated, what the assessors try to understand while evaluating the essays?
Great question. My way of looking at that is the essays are your way to share with us your responses to the questions we ask you, so that we as admissions committee members get a chance to get to know you better. We may not get to speak with you in person. We may not have that opportunity. So your essays are the way that we can peek into your world and get to know you. But most importantly, what we're wanting to know are the questions we asked. So please do not use your essay to start telling us about all kinds of things we didn't ask, as much as you might be tempted to. But for sure, answer the questions we asked and answer them in as conversational a manner as you can, as if you were talking with us. That lifts your voice off the paper and lets us hear from you. Great question.
Can a student, Indian student who is studying undergraduate in India get internship opportunities in engineering or management in USA?
That is less likely to happen, but it is not completely impossible. What I would suggest is at your current undergraduate institution, that you, if there is an office or a group of individuals who help students with their future plans. In the United States, we call this a career services office or a career development office. If there is something similar at your institution, that's the place to go to ask them if they have any contacts with any institutions in the US that might be willing. Maybe there's a faculty member at one of the US institutions who is looking for an intern or would be open to hiring an international student or bringing them over. They may not, this may not be for pay, but bring someone over for an internship. That is definitely possible. It's not as likely, but I don't want you to go away thinking it could never happen. It could.
I want to go for commercial pilot. Can you give some information about it?
For commercial pilot license and career, what I would, if you are wanting to do that in the US, then what I would recommend is that you first of all do some searching on the internet, or perhaps Dr. Dioris and his team might be able to give you some more specific advice on some programs. And I often do research for Dr. Dioris and his team for applicants who are looking for programs in certain fields. If that's something that you would arrange with Dr. Dioris to work with a student that way, I'd be happy to do that. But yeah, but again, regardless, I'm so glad you asked this, whether it's becoming a pilot whether it's becoming an architect, a lawyer, a doctor, a businessman or woman, whatever. Generally speaking, the application process is somewhat similar. There's a resume usually. There are recommenders, there are essays, there are academic information that is requested. The application process is often very similar, even though the field or the career aspirations will be different.
Yeah. This is from one student who is planning to transfer from the Indian university to United States and
Yes.
does the WES evaluation. But there are certain prerequisites which are short. So he should take in India or in USA.
My strong sense is that this institution would want the applicant to take those prerequisites in the US, but they might be willing to have them take it at their own university. For that question, because the answer will differ depending on the institution. There's not one way this is done across the board in the United States. My strong recommendation is that you contact the institution or institutions to which you are interested in transferring and ask them whether or not you could complete the prerequisites in India before you go, or whether you would have to complete them in the US before you start. Great question.
Yeah. See, there are similar 3 or 4 questions. Somebody who is doing the undergraduate in India and after 2 years, he would like to transfer to the United States as a transfer student. What are the basic guidelines, if you can highlight how the credit system and all what they can do, or in what type of credit waivers it is possible?
Sure. In most cases, if you are applying as a transfer applicant, you will either be asked to complete a regular undergraduate application like you would have if you were going to start at that institution right as a freshman, or they may have a separate transfer application on the website. So once again, you need to check on the admissions website and look at what information they're providing about a transfer application. If it's unclear to you, if they don't, some institutions are not always as easy to understand in terms of their requirements. If that's the case, send an email message to them and tell them you want to transfer. What information should you be accessing so that you complete the proper application? Now, on the other side of this, let's say you get admitted as a transfer student. Every single institution in the United States has their own system. I know this probably sounds frustrating, but every institution in the US has their own way of deciding what credits will be transferred for an incoming student. That is by the institution. They do that independently on their campus through usually the registrar's office, which is the main academically oriented office on campus. So if you apply, you are admitted, then at some point, I would think before you actually start, you would receive an evaluation from the institution stating, okay, here are the credits that we're going to accept from your 2 years of undergrad in India coming into our program. And just let me say that sometimes not all of the credits you've achieved in your first 2 years are going to transfer over. In other words, you might not be coming in to the new university as a third-year student, as a junior. You might be coming in as a second-year student based on the transfer credits that you are awarded. And I would urge you to be very careful about arguing with the institution about the credits they give you. Now, maybe at another time we could, Dr. Diores, if you ever wish to have me do a webinar on the transfer process. We could talk about this, but institutions are pretty specific about what they'll take, and that's usually non-negotiable. But sometimes you can request a reconsideration. But anyway, it will vary greatly from institution to institution in terms of what credits you'll be able to transfer in.
Yeah, it's a very complex phenomena.
It is.
This has been in news in India, because in India, new education policy, they are talking about the twinning programs, where the partial education in India and partial education. So in fact, Indian government is promoting currently onto the partial. So that is why these questions are coming. A lot of questions on the similar transfer credit part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
How the student profile is important for scholarship? This is maybe our last question.
All right. Of course, the student profile is critical for scholarship, especially merit scholarships. What you provide in your resume, in your application about your background and your academics and your extracurricular. Some merit scholarships are not just based on grades and test scores. They are based on much more. At the University of Chicago, we based our merit scholarships on academics and extracurriculars. That was very important to us. So again, what you'll probably want to find out from the institutions to which you're applying, or certainly once you're admitted, how do they determine what their merit scholarships will be? Some will not share that with you, unfortunately. They're not willing to come forward with that. Others will. And if they will share it, it will be on the website in the financial aid section under scholarships.
Yeah. So really, it's a great journey. We had the first series of webinars on very, very important topics. And Dr. Donald Martin and the astute and myself, we have really enjoyed last 10 years working together and helping the students. And I hope that with now our international mentoring program, this profile building and other activities from the 9th standard students, we can in a professional manner, we can guide all the students. So 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, so that we know which direction we can do, the parameters on which the universities are going to be evaluated, so that we become, as Dr. Donald Martins always say, it is a complete your profile. It is not only academic or non-academic or single part which is important. It is the holistic part of it, the students, the overall part of it, which is balanced applications, which have the higher chances of success in the universities and higher chances of success for the scholarships. So with this, I really thank Dr. Donald Martin for taking such a pains and taking so much of webinars, sharing his personal experiences. These experiences you will not find anywhere. It is his rich experience working with these great universities in United States, and himself admitted the students and guiding since 2008 for so many students across the globe. This is the personal experiences part which you will not get in any of the university websites or anything. So I really thank Dr. Donald Martin for the series, and looking forward to designing another series of the programs for the benefit of the students. Students, if you have anything, suggestion, any of the topics you want to have the webinars, we will be very, very happy to conduct. So thank you once again, Dr. Donald Martin, and really
very welcome.
Happy to conclude today's session.